In the heart of America's Midwest lies a town nearly forgotten by time. One church, one cemetery, and one legend that refuses to die. For decades, whispers of Stull, Kansas have rippled through urban folklore. Stories of a hidden stairway, the supposed grave of the Antichrist, and even a gateway to hell itself. They say the devil walks here twice a year, and that the Pope refuses to fly overhead during his travels. What is it about this unassuming patch of land that grips imaginations and stirs fear in equal measure? Tonight, we examine the truth, the myths, and the chilling legacy of one of America's most haunted places. Before we begin, however, today's video is sponsored by World Anvil. World Anvil is the ultimate all-in-one software for tabletop gamers, fantasy novelists, and anyone who loves creative world building. World Anvil is not just one tool, it's 3 complete creative tool sets: a world building suite, an RPG campaign manager, and a novel writing and publishing tool. It has an impressive amount of creative tools for game masters, players, fantasy and sci-fi authors, and multimedia storytellers that can help you create something incredible. And these tools include Digital GM Screen and Campaign Manager with support for more than 106 tabletop RPG systems, including a robust library of stat blocks and character sheets, plus tools to build and share a homebrew content, a novel planner and writing software with drag and drop scenes and chapters, as well as publishing, subscription, and monetization features. You'll also see interactive maps, family trees, timelines, and automatic linking to create a rich, engaging world for your game, novel, or series. Being a full-time creative writer myself, I have to say that, especially if you need help jogging that creative flow and or staying organized, and really any other motivation or assistance you might need, World Anvil has you more than covered. Try it out today and see what you've been missing by using code MYSTERY to get a massive 51% off any yearly subscription to World Anvil. You can also click the link in my description box below. Please support the channel by supporting today's awesome sponsor, and thank you so very much for your time. And now, let's get back to the content. This story holds a particularly special place in my heart. It's not only one of the first major mysteries that I heard about growing up, and one that really made me wonder just what strange secrets this world may hold, but it organically, really, as a result of those memories, was the topic of my very first ever Mystery Archives video back in 2020. It's hard to imagine that 5 years ago, when I was first laid off from my aircraft job at the time, and was entirely unsure of the future and decided to reinvent and chase another dream of mine, that I would have success half a decade later. Not only would I have an incredible community that means the world to me and 4 published books out, but my channel would have introduced me to so many amazing people and lead to some once-in-a-lifetime travels and adventures. All I can say is that I'm extremely lucky, I'm extremely grateful, and I hope 5 years from now, we can look back just as if not more fondly, not only of the beginning, but of this time right now in our lives as the catalyst for future success and happiness. So thank you all again through all of the ups and downs. I will eternally be forever grateful from the bottom of my heart and soul. And now, let us dive into the perplexing and very creepy legends of Stull, Kansas. Stull, Kansas is a tiny hamlet in the American heartland, an unincorporated village west of Lawrence, with only a few homes, a small newer church, and a modest cemetery atop a hill. In fact, little of the town remains beyond about 20 living residents and the graves of past locals. Historically, Stull was once known as Deer Creek Community, founded in the mid-19th century by German settlers. In 1899, it was renamed for its first postmaster, Sylvester Stull, after the short-lived post office was established. By all accounts, Stull has never been large. its population never exceeding a few dozen souls, and nothing especially remarkable ever happened there in its early days. A couple of tragic accidents were recorded, however. A boy who perished in a farm fire, and a man who went mysteriously missing, later found hanged from a tree. But no grand supernatural history marked Stull for destiny. It was, for most of its existence, just another quiet rural crossroads. Yet, despite its ordinary past, Stull gained an extraordinary and sinister reputation in the late 20th century. By the 1970s, whispers began circulating that Stull Cemetery and the old ruined church beside it were infested with dark, otherworldly forces. Today, the very name Stull conjures up horror folklore, tales of witches and diabolical rituals, a gateway to hell hidden beneath the earth, and the devil himself appearing among the tombstones. These legends have transformed Stull from an obscure prairie graveyard into one of America's most notorious supernatural locations. A place that, according to myth, is so evil that even the Pope won't fly over it. So how did this sleepy Kansas burial ground become the subject of such terrifying lore? Well, the story of Stull's rise to infamy is a case study in how folklore is born and how fear can flourish in the shadows of a rural cemetery. The dark legends of Stull might never have left local gossip if it weren't for a curious article printed in November of 1974 in the University Daily Kansan, the University of Kansas's student newspaper. The article, titled Legend of Devil Haunts Tiny Town, and written by student journalist Jane Pinner, was the first known publication to claim that Stull was haunted by legends of diabolical, supernatural happenings. Comparing the unassuming Kansas village to Washington Irving's legendary Sleepy Hollow, the piece reported that urban legend held Stull Cemetery to be a literal gateway to hell, a place so accursed that Satan himself manifested there twice a year. According to Penner's sensational article, the devil chose Stull as one of 2 locations on Earth where he would appear in person each year, specifically at midnight on Halloween and at midnight on the spring equinox. These bold claims were not backed by historical evidence, but they were evocative enough to capture readers' imaginations. And with Halloween approaching, the student's paper's story struck a nerve and set the stage for an enduring myth. The 1974 article relayed several eerie anecdotes to support Stull's spooky reputation. It described strange occurrences in the Stull churchyard and cemetery. One University of Kansas student claimed that an unseen force grabbed his arm while visiting, and others reported episodes of unexplained memory loss on the grounds. Tales of witchcraft and devil worship were also woven into the narrative, implying that occult rituals had long been conducted among the weathered headstones. The piece even suggested that the legends were old, saying students learned these stories from older generations, and that such tales had been told for over a century. What prompted the student author to write such an article? Some later observers have noted a satirical or tongue-in-cheek tone, suggesting that it may have been a creative piece intended for Halloween season entertainment. Indeed, the University Daily Kansan apparently ran similar spooky features around late October in subsequent years, capitalizing on students' appetite for local ghost lore. At the time, however, many readers took the 1974 article at face value, or at least found it compelling enough to spread the story further. Unbeknownst to the author, the legend of Stull began snowballing. What started as a campus paper story soon escaped into a wider circulation as others retold and embellished the claims. When the news of Stull's supposed demonic infestation reached the actual residents of Stull, the reaction was a mix of confusion, bemusement, and anger. Longtime locals were caught completely off guard by the article's shocking assertions. According to the reports at the time, Stull's residents claimed that they had never heard any of these legends before the 1974 publicity. To the people who lived there, the cemetery was a solemn family burial ground, not a haunted circus. The pastor of the active church across the road, the New Stull Church, flatly dismissed the tales, suggesting that they were indeed invented by imaginative students, but had no basis in real history. In short, the community of Stull denied the stories completely, regarding it as a prank or fiction that unfairly painted their town in a satanic light. Local authorities were likewise not amused. In the years immediately following the article, Stull began to be plagued by curiosity seekers and thrill-hunting trespassers, especially around the dates of the alleged devil appearances. At first, it was a trickle of brave or foolhardy college kids creeping into the cemetery at night. But upon the release of the article, that trickle soon grew into a flood and went far beyond anyone could have ever imagined. Of course, the idea of witnessing Satan's arrival would prove irresistible to many. One early peak of legend-driven fervor occurred on March 20th of 1978, the night of the spring equinox. Drawn by the rumor that the devil would emerge from Stull's graveyard at midnight, a crowd of over 150 people gathered in the cemetery that night. They waited in the dark for something, anything supernatural, to occur. Word had also spread that violent, restless spirits might rise from their graves that same night, adding to the overall creepy atmosphere. In the end, though, the only spirits present were those in bottles. Many in the crowd had turned the vigil into a boozy party, and no specter or devil ever appeared. When midnight passed without incident, most went home disappointed and perhaps a bit tipsy. But importantly, the lack of evidence did not kill the story. If anything, the legend grew larger. Failure to witness the devil only fueled speculation that one had to come on the exact right time or have the proper, unholy perhaps, intuition to see him. In folklore, a story often doesn't require proof to thrive. The allure or possibility of experiencing something otherworldly can be enough to keep curious onlookers coming. By the 1980s, Stull's eerie reputation was snowballing, much to the dismay of its citizens. At the heart of Stull's mythos is the claim that the cemetery is a gateway to hell itself, one of a few select spots on Earth where the barrier between the living world and the infernal abyss is thinnest. Over the years, Stull has even been called one of the 7 gateways to hell worldwide. This concept of a hellmouth in Kansas is closely tied to the tale of the devil's scheduled appearances. In some versions of the story, the devil comes to visit a loved one's grave in Stull. One popular variant holds that Satan has a wife or concubine buried in Stull Cemetery, and it is her grave that draws him here on those nights. Other accounts claim that the devil's infant son is interred in Stull, the offspring of a union between the devil and a witch, and so the devil rises to briefly visit this child's resting place. And albeit one could never verify such claims, they certainly add a deliciously creepy motive to the legend. I mean, imagine the devil tenderly mourning his dead witch bride or deformed child under the pale moonlight of Stull. It's the stuff of campfire ghost stories, and because of its imagery, really, it's stuck in people's minds, including my own. Another embellishment that fed the gateway narrative came from a 1980 news article. In November of 1980, the Kansas City Times ran a story on Stull that poured more gasoline on the fire. The Kansas City Times piece famously claimed that the devil appears in Stull every Halloween at the same moment he appears in a remote spot in India, simultaneously at midnight, in 2 different locations, as if Stull and an unknown Indian plain were twin portals. From these places, the article said, Satan gathers all the souls of people who died violent deaths in the past year and leads a macabre procession of spirits. This colorful claim of a worldwide demonic parade further solidified the idea of Stull as a key nexus of supernatural evil. If Satan himself chose Stull as one of his sacred meeting points, surely the ground there must be uniquely tainted. But why Stull? Even the 1980 newspaper sought an explanation. It offered a now notorious piece of lore. In the 1850s, a stable hand allegedly stabbed the town mayor to death in a barn on the site that later became the Stull Church. The old stone barn turned church was then gutted by fire. This dramatic origin story, a murder and an act of desecration, was cited as the reason that Satan favored Stull. There was one problem though. Stull or Deer Creek never had an official mayor at all. The town was too small for such an office. In other words, the murdered mayor tale was pure fiction layered onto myth. As these elements accumulated, by the mid-1980s, people were commonly referring to Stull Cemetery as a literal hellmouth. The legend of the hidden staircase to hell emerged around this time, greatly enhancing Stull's diabolical mystique. According to this lore, somewhere near the old church, some say in its basement, others say in a concealed pit behind the ruins, lies a set of stone steps that descend directly into hell itself. Most versions warn that the stairs are not easy to find, that they might only reveal themselves at certain times of the year, perhaps on the equinox or Halloween, or they might be obscured by brush and gravestones. One particularly terrifying detail says that if you do find these steps and venture down, that it may take you weeks to climb back up to the surface, if at all, even if you only spent a few moments in the netherworld, as though time in hell follows different rules. In short, Stull's gateway isn't just figurative. The legend insists that there's an actual door to hell in that graveyard, sealed somewhere beneath the earth, and the devil and his minions come and go at their leisure. It's a classic horror motif, a small-town version of a hellmouth, one that echoes through pop culture, from shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer to Stranger Things, and even Supernatural, and it seemed to have found a home in Stull's story. No tale of a haunted town would be complete, though, without witches and dark magic, and Stull's legend obliges. One often repeated story involves an old tree in Stull Cemetery that purportedly served as gallows for witches in bygone days. According to lore, local witches were hanged from this tree and buried below it, cursing the ground forever. By some accounts, this gnarled tree grew right through a headstone, splitting a grave marker in half with its roots, as if the very landscape protested the evil interred beneath. In reality, there was a tree in the cemetery that had oddly grown up through a tombstone and broke it. But researchers note that the stone marked the resting place of two individuals, Betty and Frankie Thomas, who died in 1879, and the effect was a natural result of the trunk's expansion. But in the imaginative retellings, this became proof of supernatural wrath, split through the stone by the ghosts of dead witches, as one dramatic account put it. For years, visitors would point to the so-called hanging tree and Stull as evidence of the town's wicked past. Its looming presence, coupled with dead branches clawing at the sky, certainly added atmosphere to the graveyard. Some said that on full moon nights, a coven of witches gathered by an old well near the tree to perform rituals and cast spells. Others whispered that strange figures had been seen levitating around the tree and the ruined church, dancing with the devil on dark nights. And as fanciful as these claims were, they continued to become a part of Stull lore. Interestingly, the infamous tree is no longer there. It was cut down in 1998 for reasons unknown, possibly removed by fed-up locals. But by the time it fell, the tree's legend had already entwined with Stull's greater myth, so even without its physical presence, the tale of the witch's hanging tree continues to be retold. Another focal point is the mysterious grave-marked witch with 2 eyes. In the cemetery stands, or once stood, a weathered gravestone bearing the surname Witch. According to one legend, the devil's own child was buried in this grave. The story goes that a witch in Stull consorted with Lucifer and bore him a son. The son was born so horrendously, grotesquely deformed that he died within days. The infant was then buried under a tombstone bearing the name, and on certain nights, also previously mentioned, the devil will rise to visit that grave and mourn his offspring. Of course, alternative versions say that it's the grave of the witch herself, and that the tombstone is a deliberate misspelling meant to hide her true identity. In truth, however, records show that the witch grave in Stull belongs to a 19th century woman, an elderly farm wife named Anna Witch, who died in 1910, along with an unnamed infant, who died in the 1860s. There's nothing obviously sinister about the real Witch family, but the coincidental name was too perfect for legend crafters to resist. Thus, it became a fixture in Stull's menagerie of dark characters. And of course, who can forget them? Stories of occult rituals and satanic cults at Stull are still abound. As the legend spread from the 80s into the 90s, people claimed that clandestine black masses were being conducted inside the roofless ruin of the old church. Visitors sneaking in at night reported finding evidence of candles, pentagrams, and animal remains. Purported signs that covens or Satanist groups were using Stull as a ritual ground. Rumors held that so many black masses were performed in the abandoned church that the building became demonically possessed itself. In one often repeated anecdote, an adventurous visitor in the 1990s found a strange altar-like setup in the church and was chased out by unseen forces, or possibly robed figures. Such claims are obviously difficult to verify and could well be fabricated by overzealous ghost hunters, but nonetheless, by the turn of the millennium, the idea that Stull Cemetery's church was a magnet for devil worship had become part of the lore. Local police even noted that vandalism in the site often spiked around Halloween, possibly due not just to pranksters, but to self-styled occultists drawn by the legend's power. Whether any genuine dark rites ever took place is possible, but the scariest rituals in Stull were more than likely teenagers lighting candles. But in the legend, the ruins of the demonic church held secrets of sacrilege, and the very walls were said to refuse to fall to the elements because of an unholy energy within. And part of that particular section of the story, I do remember when I had first researched the story, that I had come across tales of rain not making its way into the church itself, despite it pouring outside, and also despite the church, when it existed, not having a roof. Beyond witches and the devil, numerous ghostly encounters and bizarre phenomena have been linked to Stull by those who claim to have experienced its horrors firsthand. One of those is known as the Woman in White. On certain nights, drivers on the highway by Stull have reported a phantom woman in a white dress appearing on the roadside. One version says that on the eve of Halloween, this pale lady lingers near the cemetery and lures drivers to their doom. Another is the whirlwind from nowhere. One of the most frequently told tales involves an encounter with a mysterious wind inside the cemetery on an otherwise still night. 2 young men visiting the graveyard reportedly experienced a sudden and violent gust that blew out of nowhere, and this gust was said to shake trees and pelt them with debris. Startled, they ran for their car, only to find that inexplicably, the car had somehow moved itself to the opposite side of the road and was now facing the wrong direction. On another occasion, a man exploring the old church claimed that an invisible blast of air knocked him to the ground and pinned him there, as if an unseen force was holding him down. Strangely, outside the church, it was a calm night, or so the story goes. These accounts of localized malicious wind have led people to call it the devil's wind, supposedly a sign of demonic presence. Others have reported accounts of lost time and even blackouts, and of course, as we've already discussed a bit, apparitions and figures being seen. Alongside the lady in white, some chilling tales claim that a small boy can sometimes be seen hiding behind a gravestone or darting between them or the trees. Some have even described this boy as being wolfish in appearance, having a deformed face, leading many to believe that perhaps this is the ghost of the fabled Antichrist. In fact, a grainy photograph is circulated that allegedly shows a werewolf-like boy peering from behind a tree in the cemetery. Albeit the photo's authenticity is dubious at best and can't really be verified, it still definitely is pretty creepy to look at. These encounters, of course, are difficult to substantiate, but they are precisely the kind of campfire tales that keep the legend alive, providing tantalizing proof to those eager to believe that Stull Cemetery sits on a threshold between worlds. Another infamous and outlandish claim about Stull is that the Pope refuses to fly over eastern Kansas because of the cemetery's unholy power. This legend specifically alleged that Pope John Paul II, during a 1993 visit to Colorado, insisted that his private jet take an alternative route to avoid passing over Stull from the air. The story further holds that Stull's ground is so profane that the Pope, considered God's representative on earth, did not even want to cross above it, even at 30,000 feet. Of course, in reality, there's no evidence that this ever occurred. There's no records in Time magazine or any official itinerary about a papal flight path or anything of the sort altered due to unholy ground. So who knows? Maybe it happened, but more than likely, it probably didn't. Still though, the allure of the story is understandable. It gives the Stull legend a stamp of global recognition, implying that even the highest religious authorities secretly know that Stull is a literal hellmouth to be shunned. It seemed like all of these stories, for the most part, culminated in one very fateful night. That night was Halloween of 1988, and it marked an incident that was a turning point. Apparently, a crowd of around 500 people showed up that Halloween night. Their cars lined the country roads surrounding Stull, with everyone hoping to catch a glimpse of the devil at midnight. The result, of course, was a nightmare for law enforcement. Some of the crowd even grew unruly. A few gravestones were toppled and defaced, and the already fragile church ruins suffered further vandalism. For the small Douglas County Sheriff's Department, this was simply enough. By Halloween of 1989, they had set up a checkpoint stationed with deputies at Stull, telling everyone who was headed there for a thrill to turn away or they would be trespassed. Anyone who slipped in, of course, were promptly issued citations for trespassing, and in subsequent years, this became a routine, which means that, to this day, you can't visit Stull without the fear of getting in trouble or the possibility. So, as someone who's covering its tales and trying to uncover the truth behind these notorious legends, don't go there. Don't bother anybody who lives there. Don't bother local law enforcement. It's honestly just not worth it in this case, I promise. The church that was once within the graveyard itself was known as the Evangelical Emmanuel Church, is no more. Only its foundation remains, a low stone footprint among the graves. In March of 2002, the abandoned church was mysteriously torn down, with the owner later saying that it was done for safety reasons, as the structure had become a hazard. The iconic rune, long associated with Stull's darkest legends, vanished almost overnight. Many hoped that this would finally put the tales of the demonic church to rest. Yet, even after its demolition, Stull's sinister reputation proved stubborn. The legends continued, with visitors still reporting uneasy feelings near the foundation and claiming that the area was just as haunted without the walls in place. In the aftermath of the church's removal, law enforcement did notice a slight downturn in trespassing, at least for a while. With the primary visual symbol of the legend gone, casual curiosity seekers might have been less tempted and gradually would fade away. But it didn't quite happen that way. If anything, the story of the church's demolition became part of the lore too. They tore down the church to close the gateway, some would say. The church fell because the demons holding it up finally fled. The foundation stones themselves became mini attractions, with some legend trippers digging at the site in hopes of uncovering remnants to that elusive stairway. Today, visitors who manage to sneak in might only see a grassy area with scattered blocks and an empty patch where the most evil church in America once stood. Stull's journey from an obscure village to the infamous horror lore encapsulates just how folklore, media, and collective fear shape public perception. Legend grew not because of any real evidence, really, but because the idea that it was thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. It combined classic tropes, a haunted cemetery, witch hangings, the devil walking among us mortals, with a specific local location that people could actually visit. Really, it was a recipe for a self-perpetuating urban legend, and one that continues to endure to this day. You know, is it possible that people have experienced some kind of paranormal activity there once upon a time? It's possible, only about in the way that anything is possible, in my opinion. Is it worth going and harassing the locals or risking getting yourself into trouble with law enforcement as a result? Definitely not. I've had the pleasure of driving by Stull, and I will tell you that if you didn't know what was there or allegedly there, you wouldn't really miss much. In a final analysis, the legend of Stull, Kansas is a testament to the durability of folklore and the allure of the macabre. What began as a likely prank or creative article blossomed into an immersive narrative, complete with an infernal portal, vengeful witches, spectral winds, and even the devil himself. All of it set in a quiet Midwestern graveyard. It shows how a community's name can be co-opted by legend, how media and imagination can build a complex mythos practically out of thin air, and how even when faced with facts, many people will choose the more fascinating fiction. For the people of Stull, the legend has been more of a curse than a blessing, bringing nothing but headaches and vandalism to their doorsteps. And yet for the countless others who have been thrilled or chilled by the story, Stull represents that tantalizing possibility that maybe, in some forgotten corner of Kansas, the forces of darkness brush up against our world. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video, albeit it's a bit different from my usual content. I think the few residents left in Stull might appreciate someone bringing some facts to the table with this one. God knows they've endured enough. With that being said, if you liked the video, leave it a like, hype it if you can, and subscribe if you haven't already. And please let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you'd like to further support my work, you can join my Patreon at patreon.com/mysteryarchives or visit mysteryarchives.myshopify.com. I sell like shirts or hoodies or any of my 4 books. I really and truly appreciate you guys taking the time, and as always, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Make sure to stay safe out there from demons or fanciful legends, and take care. I'll see you next time.